you are standing up close to some of it. By the time you get down here, you're further away. Sometimes the work is more detailed than other times, so that happens here as well. So I always encourage walk along this side, walk across the street so that you can get an overview of it. Martha Glowacki is also a Wisconsin artist. She's in her mid-career, and she actually also helps to curate and direct the Watrous Gallery in Madison. So she has an interesting perspective because actually sort of like Maureen, because she produces work, but then she also organizes exhibitions and works with artists. And I think that actually gives you a different perspective on the way things work. So we wanted to talk to Martha. I wanted to work with her for a couple of reasons. One of them because I've known her for a while. We actually have some similar interests in the past and sort of the legacy of the past and using objects and ideas from the past. We haven't worked directly together before, and also because we have this look at the past, look at our heritage, look at traditions, et cetera, sort of going on with our themes this year. So it seemed like she would be a nice one to bring in to the windows now. She treated the windows in the way that some artists do, where each window is sort of a vignette, its own tableau. And of course it has an overall aesthetic, but she kind of treats each space as its own narrative. With a bit of exception, there are a couple that cross boundaries, but for the most part she's staying with individual narratives, and she's starting each window from a photograph that she found. She's for a long time been collecting all different kinds of things, including photography, generally from antique malls, that kind of a thing, found photography, often of anonymous people. They may or may not be identified somewhere. She's drawn to something in the image. She has, a little bit before this project, she was starting to incorporate some of that photography into her work, and then with this project, she went whole hog into using photographs as inspiration for the vignettes. And again, she doesn't always know who the people are. I talked to her a little bit about that. I actually have a blog with an interview with Martha, so you can see a little bit more about some of these ideas. And I wondered if it was easier for her to use the photograph if she didn't know who the person was, or did she feel compelled to research the people if she knew who they were? And she said it's a little bit of both. She actually kind of likes them being anonymous because then she can let her imagination blossom a little bit. And you'll find there's people of varying ages. There is a young baby. Actually, one window over, there's a baby. I do want to tell you that that is a post-mortem photo. That was done a lot in that time period, sort of recording death, not just of infants, of course, but you don't actually notice that immediately when you look at the photograph. It looks like the baby's sleeping. She didn't draw on it for that reason in particular, but she does often look at some of the photography as memorial as well. So you'll notice some of those concepts coming through in her work too. It's how we're responding to the past, how we're responding to history. She combines things that she finds, like the photographs or sculptural elements, with work that she creates. So if you said to me, what part of this was found and what part of it was created, there may be an object here like this box that's a combination of both things. She blends that purposefully, so you can't always tell if you're looking at something that she found and kind of resurrected or something that she created herself. She has a sculpture background with a lot of metalsmithing in it, so she has a fluency with a lot of the materials. And actually working with the photography was a bit of a departure for her. She's not taking the photographs herself, but she has a history with photography in that her father was an amateur photographer and she would help him in the dark room. So she's been thinking about images for quite a while. And then each one sort of has its own story, but it's not an explicit story. You'd have to kind of look at them. There's this one really neat one with two little boys that are sitting out in front of their house with a parrot in a cage. What in the world are they doing with the parrot in a cage? It's not clear. There's carpet. It looks like they were posed, but it begs all of these questions. So she went with that and then kind of let her imagination wander a little bit. So If Only We Had Met Six Stories, the title of the installation, kind of harkens back to what I mentioned before, the sort of finding of the photograph and her not really knowing for sure who was depicted and then kind of creating the story about them. And the very first window also deals with the photographer who was using photography to sort of investigate movement and flight. And so she kind of picks up on some historical images like that as well, and then creates a little tableau in front of it that looks like a machine for flight. And for those of you who have been to the Milwaukee Art Museum recently, there is a series of rooms in the basement that are all Martha's creation. They have a lot of these cabinets that she does where you can pull out drawers and touch objects or smell things. Just so you're aware, that is actually going to go away. They are reconfiguring the spaces in the basement over there, so her installation won't be up for much longer. I think she was told through September. She uses some taxidermied animals. This kind of comes back to the death thing that we were talking about. But again, I wouldn't encourage, it's not about morbidity as much as it's about the memorial and the kind of preservation. They are covered in graphite. She works with a taxidermist very often, and then they coats them in the graphite to give them this quality that almost makes it look as if it's a metal, but then also kind of freezes it in time, like it was, burnt, like right in that moment. It kind of gives it that old quality as well. So
when this first went up, I was challenged because I knew nothing about it was the first Friday.
Sure.
And a woman was just fixated on that, and I don't know.
What was she so concerned about?
Well, she wanted to know, is it metal?
No.
Is it fabricated? Is it a real
It
bird?
was a real bird.
I mean, now I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the time, I couldn't even guess.
Yeah, it does have that ambiguity in it, and again, that plays on her too, kind of challenging what just happened or what happened a long time ago, what she's found or what she's recovered. And she does also keep in mind that even though she's not taking the photographs, she is manipulating them to a certain extent. She's choosing what part of the photograph we see. She even talks about how working over the photographs or kind of enlarging them or shading out some areas or what have you, that makes it more of an intimate experience for her. That's how her narratives in a way sort of start to develop with the figures that are in the pictures as she's starting to kind of give them personality and character as she works over the photograph.
So is this all supposed to be together?
It is, yeah.
Okay. Do you get this?
It's not supposed to have a definitive answer or a definitive storyline.
Supposed to.
There's a kind of sensibility in the objects for her. And also keep in mind, look at the rest of the windows too as you're looking at that. I wouldn't look over these. There's a lot of nature, sort of like we're talking about Ken Lober. There's a lot of response to the natural world in a lot of her work, and in this piece as well. Also, this is a perspective box. We had a little Ram branded sign here at one point that said, "Look in the peephole," and then I asked Martha to create a sign that encouraged people to look inside, because otherwise they might not. And just as a kind of housekeeping, we did play with the idea of having steps so that little people could look in the hole. That is a whole safety potential nightmare, because you have steps, you have to have a railing, da-da-da-da. So, yeah. And she wanted it sort of raised up because of where it sits in the window space, but if you're wondering why that's not there, it's more of because it's actually more problematic if we do have steps. So the one other thing to note is that there is a constellation in this map. We did play with the idea of making that visible at night, sort of like the lights would be glowing. It's incredibly hard to do in this window space for all of the light, ambient light that there is around us. But there is a constellation there, and it's significant when you're talking about kind of developing a story. Think about that relative to the photograph and then the other objects. So does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you.